Last new material before the test. This is the end of muscle physiology, and we're going to do a short section on muscle anatomy locations next. We have looked at skeletal muscle this whole packet, and I told you that in the last lecture that we had a little more to do with other muscle types. As you looked at these pages, there's some information on here typed in black and some in red. Like I did with the Krebs cycle, the citric acid cycle diagram, the stuff in black really isn't something you need to know on an exam, but the pictures were sort of incomplete without it. So you're responsible for the red type, just like you'd be responsible for the notes you take. My stuff's information, and that's fine. Smooth muscle is found in the walls of internal organs. That's sort of generic. We don't count the heart in that because it has cardiac muscle, but other organs, digestive system's a big one. In the little passageways in your lungs, you have smooth muscle. The general appearance of the cells is called spindle-shaped. I said last time they are slugs swimming with a common purpose. Yes, I know slugs don't swim, but when they were bluish, that's what I thought of. This one really looks like a slug. If you've ever messed with a slug and touched its little slug nose, it goes bleep when you touch the little slug nose. When they're not antagonized, they're long and they crawl, and they look like that top picture where their slug nose is worming through wherever they go, but you're like, ooh, and they go whomp. That's what happens with smooth muscle cells also. When the smooth muscle contracts rather than the sarcomere, which shortens sort of like a cylinder this way, the smooth muscle cells get fatter and shorter all at once. It is really like a slug, and you can see in that picture if the top one is when I didn't tap the nose and the bottom one is when I did. There are some parts labeled on here. The gap junction, the caveolae, and the dense bodies. When you read through what they are, the gap junction is really nice because the purpose of smooth muscle, if you think of intestines, it's nice if you put a stimulus at one end and it goes through. Excuse me. This directly connects to your cytoplasm and sends your electrical impulses on, this gap junction. Caveolae help signal between cells also, and your dense bodies serve like your Z lines in sarcomeres, where you anchor your actin filaments. Now, you don't need to know those. They just match your picture. When I look at that picture, what I see is a short, fat little cell that shrinks. And the way it shrinks makes a difference for both of these types of smooth muscle. Multi-unit smooth muscle is more like chunks of it working on its own, where instead of having a big sheet of muscle, or like a skeletal muscle where you have the whole lot of sarcomeres, in multi-unit smooth muscle, what you're looking at are little clusters. This is the way they're found in the irises of your eye. The pupil of your eye is kind of like the lens opening on an old school camera. Not like cell phone camera, but one where you can control the lens diameter. The pupil is not a thing, the pupil is a hole, with multi-unit smooth muscle connected to it. So that's what affects how dilated your pupils are. If you put drops in someone's eye to dilate their pupil, it's the multi-unit smooth muscle that's affected. If I all of a sudden blast you in the eye with a bright flashlight and your pupil shrinks, it's multi-unit smooth muscle that's doing that to protect the internal structures of your eyes. Visceral smooth muscle is your gut stuff. Visceral means of the guts, so that makes sense. These is big sheets. This was the slug swimming with a common purpose in the last page. If you want to look back to yesterday, your diagram of smooth muscle showed visceral. Terms that relate to smooth muscle that are really, really nice that let it do the function it does. Rhythmicity, regular rate of contraction. If I clap rhythmically, I keep the beat. I don't decide to clap like this and then, that's not rhythmic. The rhythmic clapping is regular. Rhythmicity of your smooth muscle is a regular rate of contraction. Contract, 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 contract. Which, with this next term, leads to pushing food through your intestines. Peristalsis is pretty cool if you want to watch it. It's wave-like contraction of muscle. If you have been to a stadium and watched people do the wave, peristalsis is similar to that, where sections of your, say, intestines contract one after the other. With the wave, this section of the stadium stands, and then this section of the stadium stands, and you go the whole way through. With your intestines, this contracts, that contracts, this contracts. Back in the day when I was a little kid, before Bill Nye, there was Mr. Wizard. Mr. Wizard was he was halfway between Bill Nye and Mr. Rogers, honestly. He was this old Canadian dude who did science experiments with little kids, and he was awesome. He brought this little girl to his house one day, and he said, "Why does your food go to your stomach when you eat?" She said, "Gravity." He said, "I bet not." She said, "Really?" He said, "Can you do a headstand?" Now, if you say that to a little kid that shows up at your house, it's kind of creepy. "You want some grapes? Can you do a headstand?" That's like come up to the van and see the candy. A little sketchy. But he brought her to the house. They were buds. We were good. I didn't realize it was a TV studio at that point. I was like 5. And he says, "You want some grapes?" "Sure." So she eats a grape. Where do you think it ended up? In my stomach. Why? I told you, gravity. He said, "There's a pillow. Do a headstand. I'm going to help you eat a grape while you do a headstand." She did the headstand. She ate the grape. And it still went to her stomach. He showed her that this was because of something called peristalsis. He got one of the long balloons you use to make balloon animals, and he put a marble in the top of it. He told her to get the marble to the other end. So she started with her fingers and worked the marble through the tube. Her fingers moved rhythmically, and the marble squished down in a wave-like motion. That's how your digestive system works. Rhythmicity, the boop, 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 because if you're not here, or you like pushing the same spot, or not regularly enough, it's not going to work. And then the peristalsis worked the marble down the balloon. I have no animal balloons here, nor marbles. Same problem I always have at school on that one, so use your imagination. I did put in an animation of peristalsis for you in the notes. Cardiac muscles found only in the heart. No kidding. That's a good place for something called cardiac. Pretty cool. If you check out those branched cells, they're neat. They have some striation, not as much as skeletal. They got a whole ton of nuclei. They got a whole ton of mitochondria. The last thing you want to have run out of energy is your heart. If your legs run out of energy, you sit down. If your heart runs out of energy, oh no. So these are your cardiac myocytes in this picture, and myocytes are muscle cells. You'll notice, and this is in red, so this is a structure you need to know. Intercalated discs. They connect adjacent cells end to end so that electricity can pass through. Cardiac muscle is awesome. It makes its own electricity. That's super cool. This is kind of like if I were to take 2 relay sticks, like the track relay sticks, or 2 chunks of PVC pipe, plug them together end to end and duct tape them. That's basically what an intercalated disc is, and it allows electrical impulses to go cell to cell. The fascia adherens, they match up with your Z-lines again. That idea is big, anchoring your actin filaments. Don't need desmosomes, don't need gap junctions, but they're labeled in the picture, so there you go. Cardiac muscle, like your gut muscle, your visceral muscle, is rhythmic. It's also self-excitatory, meaning it makes its own electricity. You have 2 little bundles in your heart called the AV node and the SA node, and they actually are its own pacemaker. So that's pretty cool. Your brain doesn't have to send a nervous signal of electricity to your heart. It does it itself. That's one of my favorite things about cardiac system, the cardiac conduction system, is that the heart is a self-contained appliance. It does its own thing. That's pretty sweet. Most of the stuff has to plug into the brain, but this is like a solar cell. It does what it does. So, that's my overview of cardiac and smooth muscle. On your review, you're going to have a chart where you compare skeletal, cardiac, and smooth, and that is huge. That is definitely something you're going to need for the test to be able to tell them apart. So when you get to your pile of vocabulary, make sure you put some thought into cardiac, skeletal, and smooth at the end. Next thing I'll see you for lecture-wise is muscle anatomy. Have a good one.